Cybersecurity, the challenges facing FAAs, featuring Chief Information Security Officer and Director, Enterprise Cybersecurity Group, Daniel Commons.
And welcome to this year's virtual FSA training conference. My name is Dan Commons. I am the Chief Information Security Officer. For the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to talk with you about cybersecurity, the importance of cybersecurity to you as financial aid professionals, and what we in partnership can do for each other to ensure that our customers, which are the students that we serve, are properly protected, their information is safeguarded, that vital privacy and financial information that we are both entrusted with is protected, and we help them achieve their goal of education and then move on into further endeavors within their life. So today we're going to talk about four main items, and we'll go into these each one. A little bit of the overview, what's going on in the cybersecurity space, some of the problems we're challenged with and faced with every day. We'll look at some actual school examples. I'll give you some headlines as well. We'll talk a little bit about the cybersecurity guidance. I'm a federal person, employee. I have guidance I have to follow. Your school has guidance as well, both locally at your school as well as within your state, county, city, whatever your guidance directive is. And then finally, we'll talk about cybersecurity hygiene and what are some of the things that you can do to help your school, yourselves, get a little bit more aware and a little bit safer as we go forward. So we'll get into the overview. So why are we here? I know why I'm here, because cybersecurity is where I live. It's a passion. It is information that I want to get out to everybody to help us all protect that information to take care of our student population. What we're going to do today is discuss some of the challenges that we face together. We'll look at some of the cybersecurity threats. We'll talk about our roles, and we each have a very important and critical role in cybersecurity, whether we realize it or not. You sitting out there as financial experts, you feel that your position and your job is primarily dealing with financial information, student information, helping that student get that loan processed, the school paid for, and then move out to their careers after graduation. That's a piece of it. And you have a cyber role in there to protect that information. And that's what we'll talk about a little bit. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the security compliance requirements. Many of them you're familiar with. One or two might be new to you as well. So grab the headlines. I don't care which newspaper you look at, whether it be the news on your phone, your favorite website. There are headlines in the news every day. Just this morning, I saw one. K through 12 schools are having major cyber issues with over 90 incidents this last year alone in that environment from one report. As you can see here, some major ones that we've seen. Again, these are news headlines. I'm not giving you my secrets away here. I'm not giving any confidentiality away from the schools that we deal with. But Equinox, huge data center, hit by ransomware. You're going to hear ransomware a lot today. $4.5 million ransom they paid. Another university paid $457,000 to the ransomware gang to get their data back. We have other colleges that hit with ransomware attack, and in one instance we know of, the entire school got locked down and was unable to do any business. They had to revert to using cell phones for communications, going back and forth and calling each other on these little devices that most of us carry around in our hip pocket. So those headlines we're seeing, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's only what, as we refer to it, makes the Washington Post. There are a lot more incidents that never get reported to that level, either because they were dealt with appropriately at a lower level or no one's found out about it yet. And that's where folks like me worry. What have we not found out yet? We'll talk a little bit more about that. So continuing with the overview, these are some of the things that we see constantly. Securing credentials and access controls. Those are very important. They're probably more important now than ever because we saw over 8.5 billion records breached in 2019. Not a small number by any means. That's 8.5 billion people's lives that were impacted by credential theft that could lead to identity theft. We saw 150,000 vulnerabilities been disclosed to date. That again is a tip of the iceberg. Those are things that we deal with in the known environments of the schools and the information that the schools are using with their software. We see that ransomware attacks, one of the biggest attack vectors we'll talk about, you're going to hear it a lot today, ransomware. It's gone up 67% year after year after year up until Q4 2019. That's the statistic. I will bet you with COVID-19, if we were talking in Q4 of 2020, that number is going to be even higher over last year because of the COVID-19 environment. Those threat actors are getting better. They have new innovative ways to go after your information. And we here in North America are one of the biggest targets, and will continue to be one of the biggest targets. So education specifically and education breaches. You folks, primarily in the public and private sector, the public institutions, you account for about 78% of all education breaches we know about. A little over 77% of those occur in the public schools or in the colleges themselves. Of those, 67.7% are colleges, universities. Private colleges are also heavily impacted. They account for about 90.9% of all breaches within the private institution environment. When you look across the volume of people impacted, you can see in public education breaches, that's about 20.6 million records. That's 20.6 people that are impacted by what goes on around them and by having that information released inappropriately. In private institutions, the number's around 3.9 million records. So why is it important? Well, I'll tell you, it's so important to the Department of Education that both the Department of Education's strategic goals and the federal student aid strategic goals call out very specific cybersecurity goals, what we want to accomplish, what are our targets. It's very unusual to have cybersecurity up front like this in major initiatives for organizations like this. So we're focusing on two areas. You're going to see IHEs, Institutions of Higher Education. That's you folks, as Title IV calls you. You're going to see that the schools are the forefront. We're concerned with how you protect the privacy data, what kind of cybersecurity controls you have around your environments. And we're going to do that through outreach. We're going to communicate with you as much as possible. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to go out to IFAP recently. In a month or so ago, we released a new ransomware infographic. It gives you the opportunity to look at some best practices for ransomware. Share that document. We developed it to help you based on everything we were seeing going on this year with ransomware activities in the schools. And again, the other goal of both of the strategic plans is to strengthen that data protection and our cybersecurity safeguards. So what's the problem facing all of us? And it's not just unique to the schools, it's everyone that works in a cyber environment. Oops, this is the last thing you want to see pop up on your computer screen. This means that someone has taken over your computer, has encrypted the information on your computer, and now wants you to pay to get it back. The bad thing about this is not only is it your computer, but more than likely, it's every computer connected to you on your campus network. So that's one little oops. One person is all it takes to initiate a ransomware attack that will impact your entire school. So if you ever see this, the first thing you want to do is call your IT people. Hopefully they can stop it before it goes further. And stopping it may mean they actually have to unplug computers to prevent it from going forward. Again, last screen we want to see, and unfortunately, a lot of people have been seeing this type of screen this year. So what's the evolving threat landscape? You know, I've been talking ransomware quite a bit, but if we go back to the early 90s, there wasn't a lot of computers at everybody's beck and call. You didn't have them in your home, or very few folks did. You might have had them in your school environment or just getting introduced. They might have been, you know, the technology of the day, which pales to the technology of today, which will pale to the technology of tomorrow. But we saw a lot of people that were going with the hackers. They were trying to bring your network down. They were trying to do it in most cases because it was a challenge, it was fun. As we evolve from the 90s and start moving into the 2000s, 2010s, and to today, we see that landscape change. And you can see as technology has evolved, the cyber threat has increased exponentially higher and faster. We see things like identity theft become very popular. If I can get your privacy information or your students' privacy information, I can make money off of that in one way or another. I can open up credit cards in their names and obviously ruin their credit potentially for a large part of their life. I can get that Visa card to give me dollars. I can take and move your bank account information from where it is now to where I want it to be. And I'll give you an example of that that actually happened. And then as we continue evolving, the big thing we're seeing right now, and the big impact is with COVID-19, we're seeing distance learning, remote learning, uh, virtual campus environments, much like we are here today, where we're virtual. We're working together in a single environment, but we're not physically attached to each other. And to do that, you have to have electrons. You have to have computers. You have to have networks. You have to have connectivity to make all that happen. And the bad guys are going to take advantage of that. They know you're more vulnerable, and we'll get into some more reasons for that. But phishing is another big target, and phishing is typically leads to a ransomware attack. That's the entry point for you. So you got to be careful of that. And finally, the big thing that it continues to challenge us, and we're really starting to grapple with it right now, is these things: mobile devices. I challenge you to walk up to any one of your students and say, "Do you have a mobile device or a phone or cell phone?" And every one of them will whip it out and say, "Yeah, I do everything on this. I do everything. I do all my banking. I sign into all my websites. I do everything on this." And more than likely, there is not a lot of protection around that to safeguard their information. So, what are some of the specific threats? The first one is an incident that actually happened. We had a targeted set of attacks against student accounts and student information. And what they did was they got an administrator's password and username. They used that to sign in as that administrator. They went in there and created a second bank routing account. So there was a primary and a secondary. Then they left. They went away for a little while, waited to see if anyone discovered what they've done. They didn't. They came back in later on and they flopped them so that the secondary account that was the bad account is now the primary account where any payments to that student are now going. And if they did that, which they did across a large majority of the students, we're not talking pennies anymore. We're talking a large dollar value, especially if it's a very large school, 10,000 students. How much money do you give out to a student every month, quarter, semester, whatever your system gives out? That can be a lot of dollars very quickly. And that's going to my bank account in the Cayman Islands or Nigeria or wherever instead of the student's account. And in a lot of cases, in this one in particular, no one knew about until the student walked up to one of you, a financial administrator, walked up to you and said, "I didn't get paid." Well, you look in your computer and said, "Well, yeah, we paid you. You should have had the money. Talk to your bank. Talk to the bank." Bank going, "Nah, we didn't get any money for you." And then they start looking further and they look at the actual routing. And the student goes, "That's not my routing account. This one's my routing account." And then that's when we discovered that the theft had occurred. And then as we looked across all of the systems and all of the student records, we found a large number of those that, while not exactly identity theft, is theft of government dollars, obviously fraud. So very, very important that we look at those. And part of the underlying root cause of this was the institution did not have a good password policy. They didn't change passwords very often. Moving on, we see a lot of student PII out on the black market. I have a team that searches the black market looking for those type of edu type of email addresses, anything that we can trace back to a school or an institution. And we're seeing these just like everybody else is. And you can buy them for a penny or less, depending on how many you're buying. at these black market locations. Talk about the ransomware. We'll do a lot more talk about that, but encrypting your school system and having you pay for it. We saw some significant ones this year, especially in the last 5 to 6 months during COVID-19. And then, while not a concern to federal student aid, because I'm focused on Title IV information, a lot of you are universities with large research institutions within your campus. You also have a lot of intellectual property, and you've got to protect that as well. While again, that is your problem and your school's issue, and or whoever your customer or sponsor is for that information, it's still something that some of the things we talk about today can be applied to that as well. So again, I keep hammering ransomware. It's out there. We're going to continue with ransomware attacks. We're going to continue with phishing attacks where they just need one person to click on that link, give them their username and ID, or and oftentimes just click on the link and it automatically downloads the software. And then it goes out and downloads more software. And pretty soon, all of your data on your machine is either encrypted, or worse, they've taken it off of your machine and put it somewhere in the cloud, for example, and then encrypted your machine. And you're going to pay them to get the keys to your machine to unlock it, just like your front door, and hope they destroy the data they stole. Otherwise, that student information goes back and that becomes PII being sold. They get paid twice. And then if your school uses database or cloud-based databases, which a lot of schools are going to, or cloud storage, heaven forbid you've got a Dropbox account that you put everything up into, you need to know how they secure that data. Because if it's Title IV data, you're obligated to protect it in certain ways. A lot of your cloud service providers don't natively offer you encryption. You have to go and actually ask for it. So keep that in mind if your school is using any cloud storage type areas. So ransomware, I told you this is going to be a topic for us today. We've spent a lot of time on it this year, and we're going to continue to spend time working with it. Again, your prime target, they are very successful with this. Again, we need to educate everybody. Anyone that has an email account should have education on ransomware. What does a phishing email look like? And what should you do with that phishing email? We in the Department of Education run about 4+ phishing exercises every year. And I can assure you on every exercise, we catch someone that's not paying attention. It's going to happen. But if you've got your IT folks have deployed other protective mechanisms for you, security devices, you may not be as high a risk as somebody else is, but you do have a risk. And so you got to be cognizant of that. You got to pay attention to the email. Yeah, we all like, and what was big just 5 or 6 years ago was I send you an email with a link and it's a cat video, cute cat video, and everyone's clicking on it. And lo and behold, then they would download some kind of software in the machine. So we want to keep aware of that. And again, like I said, phishing attacks are back in favor. So why? You're easy targets. At least you appear to be easy targets. In a lot of cases, you are easy targets. You have very small IT staffs, and a lot of them don't have cybersecurity experience. They don't know what to do in some cases. I probably talked to 40 or 50 school IT teams this last year, and almost every case they're going, well, it's me, or it's me and one or two other people. Even the large schools have relatively small teams, and they're considered a cost burden by the university. They don't have large budgets. But all it takes is one $400 million ransomware to more than have paid your team for a good, healthy, robust cybersecurity program for 50 years. So it's a trade-off that's happening. And until they realize, and your institutions realize, the value of having good cyber hygiene and good cybersecurity, we'll continue to battle that as we go forward. You're open, you're sharing academic freedom. Internet was developed with academic freedom in mind. That thought is still part of the schools, and yes, we need it. But there are pieces that we should not have academic freedom on. We should take where you guys operate every day, put that over here and lock it up a little bit. Not every student needs access to what it is that you do or the systems that you have access to. Doesn't restrict their academic freedom on the rest of their network. They can do what they want over there and your school allows them to do. But let's take that Title IV repositories, those areas that you deal with the finances, and have that personal information. Let's just lock that up so that you guys can do your business, but other people can't come in and mess with your data. It will help you in the long run. Again, they think you have lots of dollars. Well, history shown this year, you're paying out a lot of dollars. Schools are paying big dollars to get their money back. As long as they do that, attackers are going to continue to attack you looking for a big payoff. Again, large repositories of personal information. I'm a huge target. I have 30 years of loan information. You know, I have $1.5 trillion portfolio of all these loans throughout time, and I have over 200 million records in my repository. I'm a huge target. You own a share of that because we've shared a lot of that data with you over the years, and a lot of times your schools haven't done cleanup, gone back and said, well, I haven't touched this in 10 years. Do I still need to have it here? Can I archive it somewhere else safely? Or can I just get rid of it? So things to think about. And again, we're in a new world right now. Come March, we all of a sudden became, kicked out of the office, remote workers, trying to figure out how to continue to do our job. Most of us pivoted very successfully. We saw a lot of schools very successfully go to both content delivery and the ability of their employees to continue working and doing their jobs to include financial aid administrators. We did the same thing within the department. I've been out working remotely since March, doing cybersecurity work, doing access to a lot of systems safely, securely, with no impact on my mission. And I am a full security operations center that right now is distributed remotely in roughly 9 different cities in Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland. That's where the people are located. And we're doing the job every day very successfully. And again, we have new technology, and we rushed to get that new technology in place and didn't necessarily look at how we configured it, nor how we operated it and protected it. And now schools are having to come back now and fix those problems. So guidance, I told you we were going to have a little bit of it today. It's what's necessary for us to abide by and the policies. So hopefully you're familiar with some of these. Breaches, while it's not a guidance, does have guidance behind it. We'll talk about that. It's a question I'm asked every year. What defines a breach? So we'll talk about that. Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, the GLBA is referred to. Every school gets audits on that. And starting in 2019, we saw cybersecurity as a piece of that audit. And then the last one's probably pretty new to most of you. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, Special Publication 800-171, Protecting Controlled Unclassified Information in Non-Federal Systems and Organizations. That's you folks. That's also us protecting it because it is controlled unclassified information. All privacy and financial information is categorized like that. We have to protect it. That protection then flows downstream to you. We'll talk very specifically about maybe what's coming in the future on that. So what's a breach? This is important to look at, remember, and think about. Loss of control, compromise, unauthorized disclosure, unauthorized acquisition, or similar occurrence where a person other than an authorized user accesses or potentially accesses personally identifiable information, or an authorized user accesses or potentially accesses personal identifiable information for an other than authorized purpose. Let me break it down for a second because this is important. You all are authorized users. You have permissions on the systems. You have a business need to get to privacy data for your students. That's what you do every day. That's understood. That's how you gain access to our systems to get the data to start with. You're authorized. We expect you to do your job and protect the information. When someone else gets it, or you accidentally give it to somebody else, and back when we were in the paper days, we haven't seen this since COVID-19, by the way, but back in the paper days, we've had a lot of schools report, oh, I accidentally had 5 different students' folders in front of me. I picked up the wrong one and gave a student a piece of paper On that piece of paper was another student's name and social security number. Technically, you're a breach. Am I concerned with it? What did you do with it? Well, the student immediately handed it back to me. I put him in there, said thank you, and we went on with whatever it was I would be required to within my school environment. I'm going to say, great, I appreciate it. I'm not good for me to know. It's a statistic and metric, but I'm not going to take any action on that. Okay, I expect you to do whatever your state says you need to do, but I'm not going to take any action. Okay, try to retrain if necessary, or do what you need. COVID-19 eliminated that problem for us. The other piece of this, the second item, is if an authorized user gets in a system and, for example, they have a side business and they go and use the PII data that's provided under Title IV and create a mailing list because they want to increase their customer base, that's illegal. That's a breach of information. You can't do that. That's only intended for that one purpose, which is supporting the student's education. So just be cognizant of that as we go into this. All right, so people ask me, what do we do? Yeah, we have a process. I have a team of experts, cybersecurity experts. You report something to us, we're going to run the process. And the process is going to be analyze it, work with you. That's very important. Work with you to figure out what happened. And if you're working it, great, just keep us informed. And we'll follow it for the life cycle. When you've finished all your actions, you close out the event, we're going to close it out with you, and we're done. Remember, this is a process. And as long as we're a partner in the process, everything runs smoothly. And it doesn't necessarily matter how severe it is as long as we're partnering. And that's the key I want to hit on this slide. How do you report it? I will tell you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can get a hold of somebody in the Department of Education that will respond to a breach. We've got a couple of email addresses up there. The SAG, many of you are used to the CPS SAG email address already. We've got the FSA School Cyber. That is my incident response team for schools. Our Department of Security Operations Center is open 24 hours a day. Takes that phone call. I will tell you, those guys love to get phone calls at 2 in the morning because they're awake, because they get a breach notification at 2 in the morning. They get to go wake up other people, and they seem to enjoy that. And I've gotten many of those 2 a.m. phone calls. So don't hesitate to reach out to us as soon as you find out something's happening. We'll start working with you and try to get to the bottom of it. Hopefully it's not serious to where your campus has a mission impact, but we'll try to help you as much as we possibly can. They're going to ask you for specific information. Just give us what you know. When did it happen? How's it happen? What's going on? Who, what, when, where, why, and how are the basics. Always include a point of contact. That's very important. We need somebody to talk to, preferably somebody in your IT department that knows what's going on. So to keep that in mind too. And by the agreements, you are required to report all breaches to us, and we ask you to do it. Even if we come back and say, thank you very much, we're done. We, FSA, are done. We have everything we need. We have no more involvement on this case with you, but do whatever it is you're required to do by your school or your state. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, GLBA has been around since 1999. It is what defines you as a financial institution originally. You're going to get auditors every year come in to see you. In 2019, it was modified, and that's when cybersecurity became part of the audit itself. Right now, we're seeing the first cycle of those audits come into federal student aid, and so far we've seen just under 180 institutions that have been non-compliant with one of the 3 elements of Gramm-Leach-Bliley. And that's, while it's not major concern to us, that is concerning because it appears that the GLBA is not as well known within the institutions. So what are those requirements? You need to have an information security program. It describes your safeguards, what it is you're supposed to do to protect that data. You need to have appropriate service providers that are capable of maintaining the appropriate safeguards. You need to have somebody appointed. We need a name. Who is it that can respond? And you need to do self-identification of risk. Think of it as internal controls. Make sure that you're looking at how you process things, how you do things, and how you work. how you protect, again, that student information. We have two agreements you're probably very familiar with, been around for a long time. Every school has signed them. Program participation agreement says that you're going to protect student financial aid information. The student aid internet gateway agreement says you're going to report those breaches to us. So right there it says protect it and report it. So we ask you to do both, protect it and then report it to us as appropriate. So what do we actually see in the audit findings this year? A lot of schools, a small percentage, but a lot of them that were reported, roughly 5 to 10% of them, didn't even know what GLBA was. So they didn't know what the cyber audit requirements were. And it may have been the particular folks they talked to, the first time they've been exposed to this audit. Some of you within the financial aid are used to the auditors coming all the time. So again, the response back to the auditors was, we didn't even know GLBA applied. Three major areas we've seen the findings in: didn't have that point of contact, didn't know who was in charge, didn't know who to call at 2 in the morning if you had a problem. You didn't have a plan in place. You need a good plan to know who to call and then know what to do after that person's called. Because if you start ransomware, in a recent event, in less than 1 hour, total, the entire institution was ransomwared with no way to get out of it. It doesn't take long. Electrons are very fast little slippery critters. And then you didn't do a risk assessment, and which is actually the most common of the audit findings that we see. Here's some more examples. Use accounts that are not password protected. Account passwords shared among staff members and student interns. It's not hard to get an account. Please get your own accounts. Don't share your account information. You might as well give it out publicly if you're sharing it with a whole lot of folks. People are scanning paper documents and storing them on the network but not protecting them appropriately. Anybody can get access to them. And they did find a number of malicious programs were actually installed on computers. For example, a keylogger, which captures all of your keystrokes and then takes and transmits that data to whoever the bad guy is, so that your information, user ID and password, are now available to them to do stuff with. And if you use the same password on everything, including your personal stuff, it doesn't take long to figure it out. So follow up. We're going to follow up with you. And I will tell you that at the time we're talking here, we have not followed up with anything. We put an administrative hold on all actions so we wouldn't have a burden on the school during the initial phases of COVID-19. As we go into the fall and the winter, you're going to start having communications. If you're non-compliant, you'll have communications where we're reaching out to get something from you, talked about how to correct the problem, get corrective action plans. So we'll reach out to you once we're authorized to do that, once this administrative burden hold is over. This is the only place you're going to see anything about last resort. And I say last resort because that's the last thing I want to ever have to do, is potentially impact anything related to your Title IV information. It's not my job to take your Title IV away. It's my job to help you protect that data. And that's what I want to do. And as long as we have a partnership, and as long as we're collaborating, even though we're in the middle of a crisis, then we're going to continue down and we're going to solve the problem. That's very important for everyone to remember. I don't want to have to escalate things, but that, like everything else in life, is an option. And hopefully we won't get into that as long as you're participating. And as my team says, hope they don't lawyer up. And that's a quote from them, because we've run into that from some schools where we have had to go, come on, guys, you're required to report it, so report it. You're required to protect it, so how did you protect it? So keep that in mind. I had to do that. It's a disclaimer. There is some escalation potential, but in the 3 years that I've been in this job, almost 4 years, I have never had to escalate. I've always had schools that will cooperate with us. So please do that. This is new to you. NIST Special Publication 800-171, Controlled Unclassified Information. It describes how we manage that information and data, how we share it with people, not only share it with you, but you sharing it with your third parties. I will tell you right now that this is a very big interest item within the department. We actually have formed a task team to figure out what this really means to both the department, FSA, and the schools. And then how would we implement, what do we have to implement, and then how would we implement it with you? So understand, right now, I can't give you a lot of answers or guidance. You're going to see that over the next 5 to 6 months. It's going to come out and say, this is what we need to do. We're looking at every option. We're looking at how to address the burden to you. And we're trying to make it so that we can all partner to the end point of providing more protection to that student information. So just be advised, you may be hearing about it more and more over the next 5 to 6 months. It's coming. I don't know what the form that looks like yet. Give you an idea, and if you look at this, these are what are called control families within 171. A lot of these you already do. So don't think of this as, something, way extravagant, new. A lot of this you do. You lock the doors on your offices when you leave. Physical security. Okay, you look at, cleared individuals before you're allowed access to your computers. Personnel security. Access. You're granted the rights to get to something. We give you access to our systems based on access controls and information provided. Training. We always need training. Configuration management. How do you set things up? Incident response. That's reporting the breaches. That's having the plan. So you can see a lot of these we already do. And you do them every day as part of your school's internal control. Just might not call them the same things and might not include the IT parts of it, which you'll have to include now. But again, it's stuff you may be familiar with already, and you probably are doing in your school, just calling it something else. So let's talk and wrap up a little bit with cybersecurity hygiene. That's how you keep healthy. That's how you keep your IT infrastructure healthy. Target for all of us is, man, I'd love to be optimized. If any of your schools are truly optimized in cybersecurity, please let me know. I would love to come out and talk with you about it. I will tell you, I'm not optimized. I'm happy to be in good cyber hygiene every day. Okay, it's a target. It's trying to get better every day, and we're trying to do that. You see the next generation platforms that Federal Student Aid is deploying. You probably see several briefings on that during the conference here. Next generation has the highest cybersecurity baseline that Federal Student Aid and Department of Education has ever deployed. We are serious about protecting this information and controlling the access to it. So we're moving into the proactive area. So we're trying to get to the level 5. But your target is good hygiene. You're managing it. You have a program. You're protecting the data as well as you possibly can. You may not have every resource in the world. You won't have every resource in the world, but you're trying, you're maturing, you're getting better every day on protecting this information. Here's some best practice examples. Have a policy. I've talked about incident response plans. I talked about the NIST a little bit. That's all policy driven. What's your policy, and then are you enforcing your policy? Are you following your own rules, for example? Do a risk-based approach. If we deal with cybersecurity as a black and white must be, then I will tell you we turn every system off we owned, and we wouldn't move a single piece of data anywhere. It's all risk-based. What's your risk tolerance? What's your risk appetite? And then what's the exposure that may happen if that data gets out to both your students' personal information and then their financial information? Again, identity theft will impact a student for their entire life as they go forward. And I'm sure as a student, when you're 18 to 25, 26, typically, you're just starting a credit path. And to have it destroyed because you lost your identity because someone came in and took it, that's going to be difficult for them to recover from. Backing up your data, good backups are always a safeguard. One institution that had a ransomware attack maintained a very, very good data backup process. Everything is backed up daily to an off-site cloud location, secured properly. Ransomware hit them. They caught the ransomware halfway through their department. They were able then to shut it down, to move those machines, put new machines in their place, and download the data from the cloud. And they lost about an hour and a half worth of work. An hour and a half is not bad to lose, considering some schools that got ransomware were down for weeks. And in some cities that we have seen in the last couple of years, we're down for months on some services. So it can be very devastating to your university. So you want to be careful of that. Handling passwords securely, safely, multi-factor authentication, username, password, and something else. Might be a code that comes to your phone. A lot of banks are using that now. It might be a ID card you have with an ID reader. It might be a token that has a number that you punch in afterwards. Multi-factor authentication is very effective for us. Watch out for phishing. Always work on raising your employee awareness. Training can never be overemphasized. The better trained your workforce is, the least likely you are to have an event, particularly a phishing event leading to ransomware. Monitor your third parties and how they're doing accessing your data. Make sure they're not compromising you or putting you in a bad position. And finally, use the principle of least privilege. If they don't need access to it, don't give them access to it. Goes back to taking the Title IV data, putting it off in its own restricted area. Don't allow access to the students to that, and only the people that are authorized to do it. And kind of a wrap up here, these are some of the communications we've given out over the last few years. You can see that some of them go back to 2015 and our Dear Colleague letters. We've sent out announcements on Graham-Leach-Bliley Act. Most of these are up at IFAP. What I'd like you to concentrate on real quick is the CISA resources, and that used to be called the US CERT. Those are the real cybersecurity, premier security operations type folks. Their job is to protect the entire federal government. They have a lot of free training, flyers, etc. on their sites that you can go out and access, download, and use in your school. If you're interested more in some of the NIST things, and I will tell you as a federal agency, I have an executive order that mandates the use of NIST for me. You can go out to their website. Those documents are all available for download, free, publicly accessible. Take advantage of those and use those as some of your best practices. So again, thank everybody for taking your time out to listen to me. Unfortunately, it's not as interactive as I like to be. Those of you that have seen me at previous conferences know I like to get involved with the audience when I can. And I typically don't stand still or sit still for very long at all. But again, thank you very much for attending. Please try to go to some of the other conference sessions as well. We have a lot of valuable information from federal student aid to inform you, educate you, and help train you. So finally, we'll wrap up with, this is where you can get a hold of us. That email address, FSA School Cyber Safety at ed.gov, that's where my cybersecurity specialists sit. They monitor that box. They respond to it. No, if you have a question, send it to the box. They'll be more than happy to get you an answer. And I will tell you, some answers or questions we've asked have been stumpers. It's taken us a little while to figure out the right answer, but we will get an answer back to you if you use that box. So again, thank you very much and have a wonderful conference.